Hello, and welcome to Making PBL Work for You. My name is Tiffany Knowles, and I just want to give you some information on how to use this site to help make PBL work for you. First and foremost, I want to just tell you a little bit about me and why I believe in PBL so strongly, and then I'll also give you some information on what PBL is and how you can make it work in your classrooms today. First and foremost, my name is Tiffany Knowles again, and I currently teach 7th grade ELA. I've been teaching for the past 8 years. I've bounced around different grade levels, but predominantly I've been teaching middle school. I've also taught a little bit of university and high school. Over my time in the education system, I've noticed that my students learn much more when they're engaged in what they're doing, when it's something that feels substantial to them, when it's something that is beyond textbook material and kind of takes them into real life situations. Along with that, I found that when they have the opportunity to choose whether it's how they present their project or what subject they decide to investigate, when they have those options to have a voice and that sort of authenticity, I found that they're more invested in what they're learning. So that said, PBL is this project-based education model that takes those sorts of attributes and rolls them up into one formula to help bring your kids out of the classroom and into the 21st century. So how PBL does that is essentially by starting with what we call a driving question. Students will have an inquiry-based question that relates not just to the core content and standards that they're learning in the classroom, but also to the real world. So, for example, instead of just talking about, how to write an informative essay, students might have opportunities to think about what are things in their community that they need to inform others about, real-world issues that are actually troubling the people around them and the world around them, and then they would start researching and inquiring about those specific things moving forward. So they have those sorts of driving questions, and we'll talk a little bit more in how to make PBL work for you, about how you can formulate those sorts of driving questions. But primarily, you start with that question. There's a problem, and students have to kind of come up with a way to navigate their way around that problem. They move from there into what we call the process of inquiry, where the teacher kind of takes a step back and allows the student to become the leader. So they take this ownership of what they're learning, and then they use that to kind of drive them into finding solutions to that problem that we first began with. Ultimately, once they have had time to create solutions, they do then get the opportunity to present those artifacts to a real world audience. And when I say real world audience, what we're thinking about here is how can the student really feel like they are participating in the subject. So we don't want them to just get up and stand in front of a classroom of their peers and share their project. We want them to be able to get up in front of their community members and say, hey, I've noticed that we're struggling with recycling, or I've noticed that we're struggling with being able to afford healthy food in my community, and this is the solution that I have to that, and this is how we can make a difference and facilitate change. So that sort of ability to present that artifact to an authentic audience is also a huge part of PBL, and the students have a say in how they present that as well. So we normally have either opportunities for student voice and choice in how they navigate the investigation of inquiry, or in how they present their authentic projects at the end. So they do feel more invested and more engaged, and they also get this great opportunity to discover who they are and how they learn. That said, one of the really great attributes of PBL is that it's not so much just classroom content that they're learning, but they're also learning these inherent life skills that I've sort of alluded to a little bit. So they learn to discover themselves. They learn how they learn. They learn critical thinking and problem solving because they have to figure out how to investigate these issues. They learn about how to transfer the content that they learn inside the classroom to a unique situation that's completely outside of the classroom. So all of these things kind of help them to be able to ultimately navigate their way to life, through life. Along with that, there are so many benefits that come with PBL and with using this model for education. The students are more engaged because they have a say in what they're doing and how they're doing it. They're learning to communicate in so many different aptitudes. They learn to, in a lot of cases, interact with their peers and have those sorts of meaningful collaborative discussions. But even beyond that, they have to do this research. So a lot of times the projects will place them in a situation where they have to go out and contact field experts. At the very least, at the very end of the project, when they're presenting to authentic audiences, they have to get up there and they have to talk about what they've done and what they've learned and the solutions that they found. And it's not just to their friends and their peers, it's to people who actually have a stake and an invested interest in what they've done. So they have those sorts of opportunities embedded throughout the entire process. Of course, obviously, the process of inquiry and design is also helping them to learn how to work in a field. So it's just this great model to take. Okay, this is a standard and this is a textbook, and to say, all right, well, how can we breathe some life into that and make it relate to you personally as a student? And I feel that that is something that our students really, really need. And contrary to popular belief, sometimes we think when we have a difficult set of students, for example, I'm currently at a Title I school, and those are the kids that normally we think like, we got to just focus on the standards. Their scores are so low every year. We've got to make sure that we raise the school grade and all of these other things. And not to say that that isn't important, but unfortunately, when we fall into that, we end up kind of taking a back seat to these sort of interactive and really meaningful lessons and just kind of forcing, standing in front of the whiteboard and teaching that way. And the problem with that is most of these kids have learned that way and they're not really learning. So yeah, you have some kids that are able to retain information a little more readily and they can regurgitate what you said. But then you also have kids who have no idea how to transfer the content that they learned into that classroom to any other situation. And as an educator, that really saddens me to think that everything that we've taught could be lost at the end of the year. Whether or not my kid does well on a test, if they haven't really retained anything enough to be able to transfer it to unique circumstances and settings and situations, then I don't think I've really taught them anything at all. So PBL is a way that we can help them practice those sorts of skills. They're practicing transferring, locating main ideas when they're going into the research and aggregating the data for whatever their solution is. They're practicing those skills in live time and they're relating it to things that are in the real world, and it takes up more resonance and it breathes life into the subject, whatever your subject matter is. So that said, I want to really encourage you to take a look around the site. I do have some videos posted on how to create driving questions and giving some more information on how PBL works and how it can work in your classroom. But what I'm super excited about is the sample projects that are located on the page. And from there, you can actually look at, there's a recycling project that was used in a science classroom that is extraordinary, as well as a food garden that one of my colleagues built. And I've also built an entire 7th grade ELA curriculum using the collections textbook and consulting all of the necessary standards. So I would love it if you kind of peruse those things and can take some of that to use in your own classrooms, even if you have to adapt it in various ways. What you'll see there is that there are so many different ways to do a PBL style project. It can be something that lasts 9 weeks. It could be something that lasts 4 weeks. It can be small, it can be huge. Some of my projects are something as simplistic as having a debate. And you'll notice with the food garden project that was contributed by Ms. Stephanie Mentor, that her kids are creating a physical food garden to solve the issue of affording healthy food in Miramar, Florida. So it can be as huge or as small as you want to make it, or as you feel like your kids can handle. But either way, it still has all of those benefits that we talked about. Additionally, if you yourself have conducted a PBL style project, please feel free to go to that submissions tab and share what you've done, because it would just be so extraordinary if we could all come together and really help each other administer these sorts of projects. One of the things that I've noticed from going to various PBL workshops in my district is that a lot of teachers are very convinced that this is something that works. There's so much data for project-based learning and for similar inquiry-based projects, and the data really does speak for itself. We know that students have higher test scores and higher attendance rates when they are interested in what they're learning and when it feels meaningful to them, and PBL gives these kids that. But the issue that we have, and that I hear when I go to these conferences, is, well, I don't have the time. I don't have the time to create a 9-week project, or I don't have the time to teach all of my standards and to teach a project at the same time. And it can be overwhelming, because we oftentimes as educators get all of these mandates and ideas dumped on us. But then we don't get the support that we need to actually execute those ideas. So it is my hope that this website will give you the support that you need to execute those ideas, whether it's you looking at some tips on how to create a drive-in question and just feeling inspired to create your own, or whether it's going to those sample projects and borrowing some things and maybe just tweaking them a little bit and bringing them into your own classrooms. So that said, again, if you have projects that you have worked on and that you know work and they're tried and they're true, please feel free to contribute them to submissions so that other teachers can use them in their classrooms and use them to help benefit their students as well. Thank you so much, and I hope that this is helpful to you, and I look forward to hearing from you and seeing your submissions.